What has been one of your hardest days at church? Last week, we spoke about some of our best moments in the church and the photos that can remind us of them. However, for all of the great days we live through, there are undoubtedly some very hard days as well. We might not have pictures of these days. On my hardest day, the last thing I would have wanted was to be photographed. However, even without the pictures, I find it quite easy to remember my hardest days. I can remember what happened, my own thoughts, the people around me, and sometimes can clearly recall the memory, even when I would rather not. One of my hardest days in the church was ironically on Christmas Eve. As a chorister, I practically lived in the church building on Christmas Eve, singing through multiple services and having dinner with my fellow musicians. My family would attend the midnight service, and I have memories running up to them after the service to wish them a Merry Christmas just after the clock had struck midnight. Although I was exhausted at the end of the night, I was also always energized. The energy and love of those gathered on Christmas Eve is hard to top. Christmas Eve 2007 was different for me in many ways. My paternal grandfather had died a few days before Christmas, and it was the first time a grandparent I knew had died. My dad left to travel to Sri Lanka right before Christmas to arrange the funeral and be with his mother, so Christmas already felt very different. I hadn't told anyone about the loss I was experiencing, mostly because I didn't know what to say. And I didn't want to bring the jolly mood and energy of Christmas down. I didn't want other people to be sad because I was sad. But I was really sad and didn't know how to hide it. I went through all of the Christmas Eve services, focusing on the singing and the tasks I had to do rather than the smiling faces of the people around me. It was during the last hymn of the midnight Christmas Eve service where I could not go on any further. I tried to sing the recessional hymn as we left the church, but no sound was coming out. My eyes started to tear, and to be honest, I wasn't sure what was happening. As all of the choristers went to the choir room to change out of their robes, I found an empty room and just sat in the dark and cried. To this day, I haven't told anyone about that Christmas Eve so long ago. It felt so wrong to be sad on one of the great days in the church, but it's all I could feel. And I didn't know how to move past it. Today, when I think about that day, I wish I had told someone. I wish I had reached out for help because I know on top of all I was feeling that night, I would not have felt alone. I would have had people to hug me, to support me, and to pray for me. It was one of my hardest days in the church, but one of the reasons it was so hard was because I chose to go through it alone. Even though people have some of their best and most beautiful moments in the church, think of weddings and baptisms and times of song and fellowship. Churches can also be places and gatherings that we look back on with grief and distress. I often think about how one building and one community of people can hold so many moments and stories within it. It's even stranger that on the same day people gather together, one person can have their best day while someone else is having their hardest. I believe there is no space or people that can hold these contrasting moments together in the same way. Even though we are not physically gathered in the church building at this time, we have all continued to come to worship in new ways as we go through some of our hardest and best days and all the ones in the middle. It is in this time that we pray, that we listen to God, and that we see the other people in our community inspired by faith and living in hope. You may have memories of your hardest days in the church that stand out in your mind, but it is through faith and love you have been able to continue to move through those moments and come back over and over again. These are the moments I am most thankful for. What has been your hardest day at the church? This may include when you are physically in the church building or maybe not. How did you feel that day? Who helped you through that day? It is an honor to grow in faith together, even while apart.